Hey guys, so today I am doing a different video than I've ever done before on my channel. I decided I wanted to start a new series called CCTV. So you guys will probably recognize that term. That is what's used as security cameras throughout the world. I don't know the exact name. I cannot remember for the life of me right now what CC actually stands for, but for my series I would like it to stand for Crime Catchers TV. And what I'm going to do is basically break these episodes, or I'm going to break these videos down into episodes. So this will be CCTV episode number 1. I love true crime and I'm kind of obsessed with it. I love watching those videos on YouTube. You know, I have several people I can list down below that I watch, but I thought about it and I thought, you know what, I'm so obsessed with it, why don't I go ahead and start my own series on it? So that's exactly what I'm doing today. And I wanted my first video to be something that I really cared about and something that I could talk a lot on. And that would be the case of Johnny Gosch. So I know you guys have probably heard of him before if you are addicted to true crime, kind of like I am, and even if you're not addicted to it, Johnny Gosch is a really huge story, and it's reached a lot of people, so I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that have heard about his story, and I want to share that with you today. And I do want to mention that there are a lot of videos on Johnny Gosch. There's been a lot of TV shows, a lot of interviews, just several things out there that have to do with Johnny. Netflix has a really great documentary on Johnny Gosch. The only issue is that it's an old documentary. It was put out there in 2014, so there's a lot of new information that's resurfacing, and there's a lot of information that I found that was kind of left out of this documentary that I felt like was pretty important. With that being said, it was still a really good documentary, just some things were left out. And that's because his case really changed the way kidnappings are dealt with, and for that I love his mother for doing that for the world. And I could argue that he is the entire reason America knows what a pedophile is now, and what its human trafficking is, and children, and so on and so forth. I could go on about his mother. I think she's an incredible lady, which is why I chose this case to do first, because it breaks my heart, and the family is so amazing. So let's get into the story. So Johnny Gosch, he was kidnapped on September 5th, 1982. So he was 12 years old at the time. He was out doing his morning paper route. It was a Sunday morning. It was around probably 6:30, 6 o'clock in the morning when he was kidnapped. And similar to every Sunday morning, Johnny had his own paper route. He did this every Sunday and went and delivered papers. The difference was this was the first Sunday that he was not with his dad. So, he was by himself when he left the house at about 5:45 a.m. He got his red wagon with his last name on it, and he got the family dog. She was a little wiener dog, so that's really cute, but she was walking with him. And something I want to mention before I tell the rest of the morning. I found this only on one website, so I don't want to say it's for sure a fact, but I thought that it was worth mentioning since I did see some coverage on it. It's the fact that supposedly on Saturday night and kind of days leading up to the kidnapping, there was kind of a group of men that had a picture of Johnny that would kind of show people, just be like, hey, who's this kid? Where does he live? You know, what does he do? How old is he? So on and so forth. And there was also some really strange phone calls that were made to the Gosch residence. There we go. Noreen supposedly, if this is a fact, I checked around more for information on this, and I found a few sites that were mentioning this. So Noreen mentioned that it was really strange because especially Saturday night, they were getting a lot of phone calls to the family house, and you know, Dad would answer and he'd be like, oh, you've got the wrong number, and hang up. And it was kind of no big deal. And then the last call that they received on Saturday night, which was really late, Dad answers the phone and he supposedly says something along the lines of, yes, all right, okay, and hangs up the phone. And Noreen thought this was really strange, so she asks him, like, hey, what was that about? And he just kind of shrugs it off, doesn't really answer or say anything about it. So she thinks it's strange, but not strange enough to the point where she questions it further. So, back to Sunday morning, Johnny's out delivering his papers. So something really important is that Johnny was walking by himself initially to get the papers, but when some strange things started happening, he was actually with 2 other paper boys. One was 16, and I'm not sure about the other one, but he was there with Johnny. And it was really early in the morning, and, there was this car is kind of traveling around the neighborhood, going kind of slow, kind of just like checking things out. And finally, when Johnny is with these 2 other boys, he pulls up against the street and he says to Johnny specifically, hey kid, where's 86th Street? So Johnny was said to be very polite to the man, very helpful, and told him where it was. And supposedly, Johnny turned around to the other 2 boys and he was like, oh wow, he really freaked me out. He was like a sketchy dude. I'm just gonna head home. And it was on Johnny's walk back home where he was taken. So the 2 boys go on this way, let's say, and Johnny walks back this way with his dog and his wagon, and a man comes between 2 of the houses and stays about 10 paces behind Johnny. And as soon as Johnny rounds the corner, you could hear what sounded like kind of a scuffle, and then someone being thrown into the back of a car doors slamming, and then tires screeching to take off. And this car blew through the stop sign. So the boys were kind of like, oh, what the heck? And there was a neighbor that heard this as well, but I guess it wasn't strange enough to the point that anyone was like, oh god, someone's been taken, which we have to remember, this was 1982, this wasn't something that was common. A pedophile was something that nobody knew of, and kidnappings just didn't happen, especially apparently in Des Moines, Iowa, however you say it. I'm probably butchering that, but apparently this was a very, very, very safe area, so this was just a really kind of strange thing. So about an hour goes by, and Noreen, Johnny's mom, is woken up at 7 o'clock in the morning by the phone ringing, and she answers, and she's like, hey, or whoever's on the line is like, hey, where's Johnny? We haven't gotten our paper. So Dad gets up, and he goes to find Johnny on the route, and finds the family dog as well as Johnny's wagon, but no Johnny. So immediately, he's like, we need to call the police. So let me look at my notes for this, because I want to be 100% accurate when I tell you this, because this was just the most disgusting thing I found in the whole case. This was just horrible on part of someone that was willing to help. They called the police. The police were only 2 blocks away, okay? 2 blocks away, which should take like, what, a minute or 2 to reach where they're going. And it took them like an hour to get to Johnny's parents. And when they finally got there, they kept accusing Johnny of running away. Now, this was something that Noreen and Johnny Sr. knew just wasn't a possibility. The entire reason Johnny had this job as a paperboy was because he was saving up for a dirt bike that he really wanted, and he had just recently gotten enough money to buy it himself. So there was just no way. He was a really happy kid. He had a lot of friends. He had just a really great home life. It just wasn't like Johnny to just up and run away. Nobody thought that was even kind of the case except for the police. Something else that happened was they got there at 8 a.m., okay, and they leave and don't show back up until 2 o'clock in the afternoon for Johnny's parents. Why? What is that about? I don't know. So they search the area for the next couple of whatever. Nothing turns up, not even a trace, nothing. Well, Noreen was really the entire reason they kept the case alive as well as they did, because she just wasn't going to stop. And she'll even tell you, hey, you know what, I probably definitely got on their nerves, but this was my son, this was my child. Where was he? What was he doing? Why was nobody doing anything to help me more? So another thing the police were doing to Noreen and Johnny Sr. was every time they would tell them something, the police would respond with, well, what if what you're saying is true? And, you know, I can talk forever about how horrible law enforcement handled this case. I would need a whole separate video because it was just awful. There was just nothing else to say. So, Johnny has been missing for 6 months, and a woman in Ohio, I believe, claims that a boy comes running up to her, pleading for help, like absolutely begging for help, saying he was Johnny, and before she had time to do anything, 2 huge men come running, grab this boy, throw him in the back seat, and take off without a trace. Absolutely no leads were followed because they just didn't have anything to follow. And this woman was like, oh my God, like I literally didn't have time to do anything. 2 years of being missing, and a woman is at a grocery store in another city in Iowa. I think they said it was about 2 hours away from Des Moines, and she gets a dollar bill back, and on the dollar bill is written, I am alive, Johnny Gosch. So they test this up against some notes that Johnny had taken in school with the writing on the dollar bill. It turns out it's actually Johnny's handwriting. August 1984, Eugene Martin is kidnapped on his paper route in the same neighborhood Johnny Gosch was taken. Eugene's mom and dad were asked, hey, did you know about the case with Johnny? Why did you let Eugene walk by himself if you knew about this? And they were like, well, again, this was the first time he had gone out without us, and you know, who would have thought? Why us? Type of thing. Well, Noreen got together with these parents, and in talking with Johnny Sr., Noreen came up with some different ways to advertise Johnny's picture, and if it wasn't for Noreen, pictures of missing children would have never ended up on milk cartons. She is the entire reason Johnny and another little boy were the first 2 kids to show up on milk cartons. And actually what had happened was they went to the milk production place themselves, and they pitched the idea, and the milk carton people were like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know, milk carton people. I don't know what they're called.
But they're like, oh my gosh, that's a really great idea. We will absolutely print his picture on our cartons. And bam, that was done. 10 years goes by. Okay, 10 years, no answers, no nothing. And Paul Bonacci is arrested and put in jail. When he is put in jail, he comes forward saying he helped kidnap Johnny Gosch. Now, this absolutely sent terror through the people of Des Moines especially, but everyone, really, because everyone was kind of like, what the hell? Like, is this guy for real? He's just kind of, I hate to say this, but he's just, it's kind of like, you know, weird guy, and you're kind of like, oh, you know, do you really know what you're talking about type of thing. But he comes forward with some very detailed facts that he wouldn't have been able to know without knowing Johnny personally. Obviously, there were things Noreen kept private about Johnny that she didn't want the world to know, and she used that to her advantage because when people claimed, oh, I know where Johnny is, she could say, well, how do you know it was Johnny? And they would list off these things that she hadn't shared with anyone before. The man that I told you about a second ago that was in the car talking to Johnny the morning of his kidnapping, they call him Stocky. And Paul says, well, Stocky and whomever else was with him forced me into it. He said, I myself was kidnapped when I was little and was forced into sex slavery. I was molested. I was physically abused. I was sexually abused, so on and so forth. And he says, and when you reach a certain age, you, instead of getting to be free, are forced into helping kidnap more kids, and this is what happened to me. He said, my job was to chloroform Johnny once he was in the car, so he couldn't really fight back. And he actually, while he is in prison, Noreen goes to visit him, and he breaks down crying in tears, and he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry what I've done to you. I'm so sorry what I've done to your child. And he goes on to tell her that he was forced to molest Johnny. He was forced to do other things to Johnny, and there was a private conversation that was not aired because this initial interview was on live TV, I believe, America's Most Wanted, maybe? I can't remember. It was filmed, though, and there was private information or private conversation, and he told Noreen about some of the birthmarks Johnny had that she had not shared with the world for the world to know. And she thought, well, he took my son. Like, this is absolutely right. Well, he goes on to talk about a ranch house that they were being held captive in at one point. So in 1992, Bonacci gets out of jail, and America's Most Wanted takes him to this house that he describes. And what was interesting about this house was he told them, yeah, we almost got busted here. This is where we were hiding, and it was in a basement. He said the kids would write their initials in the wood. And he said this is actually where Johnny and another boy escaped from. So we've got some more information saying that Johnny is alive, Johnny has escaped, and he's in hiding. He's running. He is spending his life hiding from these horrible, horrible people that put him into sex slavery. 11 years after Johnny is missing, Johnny Sr. and Noreen get a divorce. He was kind of saying that, well, she's doing too much, she's believing too many people, she's letting it affect everything, we're working our butts off, but what more can we do type of thing. And Noreen just wasn't letting up, which I think is so admirable because this was her child and nobody was really helping her. Something else I wanted to mention as well. Supposedly in 1997, at 2 o'clock in the morning, Noreen gets a knock on the door because she still lives in the same house Johnny would know. She said she walks like kind of to the window next to the door and she yells, "Who's there?" And he says, "It's me, Mom, it's Johnny. Can I please come in?" And Noreen said she opened the door and immediately knew it was her son, could look into their eyes. You just never forget who your child is, sort of thing. She said at this point in time he would have been 27, 28, but she said you just never forget your child. You never forget those eyes. And she said, he had changed so much. He was a man. He had long black hair. He just, all this stuff. So he was with another boy or I guess I should say man, when he visits her. They come in. He stays for a couple hours telling her everything. To this day, she still will not tell anybody what was discussed that night. She says that Johnny needs her to keep it to herself for his protection, which I find very interesting, which I think makes it more believable for me because why wouldn't he tell her everything and say, but I have got to stay alive, you have to keep this to yourself. And he was like, if I stay here too long, they're going to know where I am. She didn't tell anybody about that until she was in court, and they said, have you talked to Johnny in the last however long? And she says, well, yeah, I talked to him in 97. And that made headlines everywhere because everyone was like, what the hell, then he's not missing. And she was like, well, he stopped by my house to tell me that he's okay, that he's alive, and that he is on the run and in hiding. And everyone, again, was just kind of like, what the hell? So Johnny Sr. actually believes that this is not the truth. He thinks that she is delusional and letting the depression take over, and she's saying, I've got all these people around me, how can I be letting that happen? I don't know. I think it's a huge possibility, but obviously, I can't say anything for sure. So, fast forward to 2008, Noreen gets an email full of pictures of young boys who were tied up, gagged, and if I can put the pictures in right here, I will. It will make you sick, so I'm just going to put in a warning. If that is going to trigger you, heads up, that is coming. It's a really very sad pictures, and I hate it to death. But she immediately takes them to the police, and there was one picture of just one boy, and she swears up and down it was Johnny. Other people are kind of saying, no, I don't know about that. Dad argues his feet are too small. I don't know. I think a picture can show different angles and different sizes. I think it's not really fair to say, well, his feet are too small. What I think is going on. So I absolutely 100% believe that Johnny was kidnapped and sold into sex slavery. I think he was a part of a big sex trafficking ring out in the West. Supposedly in 1969, the same ring that Johnny was in was almost busted, and they ended up getting away, which I think is so sad, and it absolutely disgusts me that anybody can do this to a child. I can't even talk about it because that just makes me sick to my stomach. I don't understand how you're going to do that to a kid. So I absolutely think that's what happened to Johnny. There's so much evidence pointing towards that. I think Johnny is still alive. How Noreen really changed the game for understanding what a pedophile is, understanding that there are people out there who pay to have sex with children and to molest children, and if it wasn't for her, I do not think Americans today would know what a pedophile is. I absolutely don't think they would know what a sex trafficking ring is. And I just, I have so much respect for her, someone who could take something so horrible that happened to her and turn it into such an educational thing for Americans so she can say, hey, watch your kids, there are people like this out there. I hope you guys liked CCTV episode number 1. I really enjoyed doing this. I'm looking forward to doing many, many more. So if you guys liked it, make sure you let me know down in the comments. And if you guys have suggestions of cases you would like for me to cover, let me know in the comments as well. And definitely make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any of the CCTV episodes. And with that, guys, I will see y'all in my next video. Bye!